with a partner, the International CCS Knowledge Center, and one of our speakers will explain in detail who they are. But we actually together over the last year developed, and we heard for the one who were here in the previous event, we heard that each project is going to be different. We heard that it's a case-by-case approach, but together with the CCS Knowledge Center and as part of the GCCA mission to help to share good practices and knowledge, we developed for the benefit of our members a CCUS Handbook. So it's what are the key questions that you have to ask yourself to develop a project. So I'm just opening up. Then I will pass on to Mark Walton of the International CCS Knowledge to unveil a bit of the handbook. I insist this is a members-only document. We want to give a benefit to our members, but we will explain what is in the document. And then we will have a panel discussion with our members, Holcim, Cedric Demeus, Winston Beck, Heidelberg Material, Antonis Kirkos of Titan, and Vicente of Cemex. They are not going to repeat what you heard an hour ago. Now we are into project to illustrate the handbook. So stay. And our moderator is going to be Bez Hardy, the Vice President, Policy and Regulatory Stakeholders Relation at the International CCS Knowledge Center. So I think by now everyone knows, but maybe there is still someone in the room who doesn't know this is the GCCA roadmap. We are using all the levers, but we need CCUS. And according to the GCCA roadmap, this is 1/3 of the emission reduction towards 2050 is relying on these technologies, both a combination of use and storage, but it's really key. And that's the handbook we are going to talk about. And I can say our members are very, very happy with the development. So now, Mac, because we are running beyond schedule, so I pass the floor on to you.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Mac Walton with the CCS Knowledge Center out of Canada. Just a little bit about our organization. We were created to share the lessons learned at the world's first fully integrated post-combustion CCS on a coal-fired power plant in Saskatchewan on the prairies. And what we do is we're a nonprofit that provides independent and expert advice throughout the life cycle of CCS projects, from the early feasibility stages through construction, through commissioning and optimization of CCS projects. And so we were happy to be a part of developing the guidebook. As mentioned, it builds upon the work that the GCCA is doing related to the roadmap. They have the wonderful progress report, booklets that are out that were released yesterday, and it shows a lot of the progress that's being made onto these important CCS projects, which, as mentioned, represent about 1/3 of emission reduction for the cement industry to get to net zero. Just a quick piece that we just wanted to mention kind of about the purpose of the guidebook. It is, as mentioned, a members-only guidebook that provides guidance. And really, it's about the key questions, the critical data, and the decision points for the very different projects and different locations for developing CCS projects. The timeline for developing CCS projects is quite long, and it's not easy. If it was easy, I wouldn't have a job. I would be unemployed. But importantly, there are lessons to be learned throughout the project development timeline. So right from the get-go, implementing the technology, it can take more than 6 years. I know the project that we worked on probably took longer than that. Especially when you get in governments involved, it takes even longer. The other piece that is really important to mention here is that the access to a proper storage and or usage site is super important. There's no point of capturing CO2 if you are going to just release it back into the atmosphere, of course. The guidebook itself, as I mentioned, covers key questions, decision points, and critical data. It's very important to think about the early activities that should be done for a facility to be conducted. The guidebook provides a key summary of that. It goes into the project development timelines. Importantly, considerations regarding the energy integration for your facility is really important. We have already seen projects that we're evaluating doing a CCS project, but without adding in power and energy integration into a facility, it was not, the business case would not go forward. And so it's a very important consideration. Other decision points like site location. We've seen areas where there was consideration for a capture facility right beside a school, for example, and then they had to build the facility on the other side of the site, which has a lot of different impacts on the footprint, the energy integration, all of those different pieces. The other piece that I'll talk a little bit more is capture technology, as well as your intended goal for the outcome of the capture carbon. One thing that we do a lot of and is a very important aspect is the characterization of the flue gas for the specific plants. That has a tremendous impact on the efficiency and capacity of your capture facility. And then on top of that, there's three really important parts to get projects done, which is related to stakeholder engagement, the policies and frameworks to be in place to allow for CCS projects, as well as project financing, business models, and incentives that exist. I know that we're a bit behind, so I'm going to go just quickly. Just making sure that I'll give you guys this quick snapshot here of one of the major aspects of the guidebook is related to capture technology selection. So there's some important work that the European Cement Association or Research Academy provided and is incorporated into the guidebook, looking at the different TRL levels of numerous different technologies, the costs associated with them, and kind of providing that high level understanding to get people in the right footing to move forward with the projects. So from there, I'm going to turn it over to people who are more important and to talk about real projects that are ongoing. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, Max, so much. Thanks to everybody for being here today. So I'm Beth Hardy-Vallejo. I'm the Vice President of Policy, Regulatory, and Stakeholder Relations at the International CCS Knowledge Center. And you know what? The last panel that was just up here was really interesting. I heard 3 out of 5 of the panelists talk about knowledge sharing and the importance of knowledge sharing, and that's actually why we tried to do the guidebook with the GCCA for its members. And so while we'd like to share and open every single page like we did last night with the Net Zero book, this is a members only book focused particularly to ensure that there is collaboration between members of the organization and to accelerate the deployment of CCS to open up some of those barriers that we're seeing. And it's not just about, we heard the person from SAM talk about governments and how important that is to collaborate, but this is actually working level and trying to get working level knowledge shared. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about more today. I'm going to get my panelists to really tune into their projects specifically. That's my cue to them right now. And just by way of background, as Max said, we had the world's first post-combustion carbon capture and storage facility at Boundary Dam on a coal-fired power plant in Saskatchewan, Canada. And we're taking that knowledge and lessons learned directly. We've worked with Brevik. We're working directly with Heidelberg in Edmonton. We're working with Wholesome as well on various different projects. And we are looking forward to actually having those engineers that integrated the facility understand how technologies adapt and work with different particulates and flue gas to actually implement these technologies. It sounds so easy, right? Let's go buy CCS and put it on the facility. But I think we're all learning very quickly what we saw since 2014 at Boundary Dam, that these projects take a lot of planning, a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of people, and a lot of knowledge. And there's a lot of things that aren't competitive, sensitive information. And breaking through that is going to be really important. So with that, I would love if I could have my panelists come up and join me. So Cedric, Winston, Antonis, and Vincent, please. And and Devika. I've recent addition to our panel, and I'm so glad to have her as well. So I feel kind of funny standing up here as opposed to sitting down with you, but nevertheless, here I am, the overlord of this panel. So I actually am going to go straight to Devika, who has joined us to just say, about why we decided to do this handbook, this guidebook, to work together on sharing these lessons.
From here. Yeah. Sorry for that, but as we have seen, GCCA roadmap, I'm going to refer to it again. 36% needs to be in CCUS, and like the last panel as well said, there's a dire need for CCUS. But even with that dire need, we looked at, we realized that for a company to start a CCUS project, they actually start from level 0. I mean, you have to look at so many aspects. It's not just about, CCUS is not only about just technology, like, carbon capture technology. It's not just demonstration. It's also to understand whether the technology can be scalable, and what is out there. And this is the part of just capture. Now, when you look at, utilization, it's not just utilization routes. There are so many plethora of technologies where you can look at utilization. But what we realize is for utilization, it is market driven. It is dependent on what location it is. And similarly, when we talk about storage, that's another ballgame when we talk about not only the infrastructure, but we are also looking at transportation. So many aspects, and we realized every company is starting at level 0. So what is it that can be done wherein we kind of synchronize the information that we have, considering we have 80% of the global cement companies as members for GCCA. So we realized that we need to have this one document which will, if I want to start tomorrow, I at least know what to be aware of, what to do when it comes to, starting a CCUS project. What am I getting into? Mac actually talked about the timelines. We said it is going to be 7 years. Well, it also depends on what are the policies, what are the permitting issues, where are we putting. So we realize that this is going to be a tough document, to be honest, but we need to work together. We need to collaborate. We need to understand what are the challenges that we are facing. At the same time, also share the success stories of where CCS or CCUS has been successful. So to begin with, we started doing a lot of brainstorming within the GCCA's CCUS task force. That's where we realized that, this document needs to be made. But where do we start? How do we start? I mean, we identified different myths, different questions. So the decision points or the critical questions that you see in the, what Matt talked about is, are the ones where we started. And this is how we, internally brainstormed, and then with help of International CCS Knowledge Center, we developed this handbook, including some of the GCCA resources like the ECRA technology paper, GCCA CCUS policy paper, and obviously a lot of information from members, a lot of feedback, detailed feedback to our documents. So now it stands with a lot of efforts that have gone into it, and I'm hoping that this is going to be the first step to a guiding document. We have case studies in that, which gives like a perfect way to assess where do we start. Yeah.
Case studies. What a perfect segue to what we're going to talk about next. So I actually want to go to our panelists. Some people were not at our last panel, so they're not familiar. And when I sent out the overview of what we're going to be speaking about today, I did allow you a 3-minute time to talk about who you are, what you're doing, and that project focus that we see from that handbook and guidebook. So I'll start over on this side and we'll walk our way over and then we'll go into some of the questions we have today. Does that sound okay?
Yes, perfect. So I'm Vicente Saizo, I'm from CEMEX. I coordinate the sustainability function within our company, responsible for what we call a Future in Action program, which is our program to decarbonize our company to achieve ambitious targets by 2030 under the 1.5 degree scenario and reach all the way to net zero. Explained a little bit before on the previous panel that in our road to net zero, we definitely need CCUS and it contributes by close to 30% of the total equation. So for sure it's a lever that has to happen and we have to make it effective. I wanted to share part of the experience and I will have a later chance to talk more about our strategy in reflecting on a guidebook on how you approach this. I wanted to touch on some of the soft elements, but that could make a huge difference. Is internally in CEMEX, we first needed to develop some internal capabilities to be able to address CCUS. We didn't know, we were used to the traditional technical and technological projects in our industry, which was expansions of capacity, changing a grinding mill, etc. So this is a completely new ballgame. We had to bring internal, external expertise to within our company. Obviously, you can also partner with expert companies in contributing with what you don't know, but the first thing that you have to have is a very good internal setting in terms of team that is completely aware of what are the different elements of CCUS project. We developed some workshops where we try to level up the knowledge of the different technologies and different options and different elements of a CCUS project in different levels of the organization, starting with the top management. If the top management doesn't know the basics on this, it will hardly become effective in terms of guiding the whole project, and then gradually getting deeper dives into different levels of the organization. We also develop a matrix organization in which we have strong central skills, but given that each project is different, we also have the local technical team to be fully aware of this. So we also did a lot of onboarding of the local teams. We hire from the external world some local experts in the specific locations where we think there's going to be the biggest potential for developing these projects. We mentioned in the last session that we are focused for the moment in the US and Europe because that's where the incentives are in place to start to develop the projects and to start to create some initial business cases for developing these projects. Perhaps I can bring to the table the example of working in the US, and we have two focus areas, which is California and Texas, where we are developing projects, and each location is very different. And there are some things that you think that are going to be easy to solve, but when you start to get into the details, are not so much. In California, from the strategic point of view and from the feasibility point of view, it was quite obvious, for example, that there's an emission trading system in place. There's already a carbon price. So if you have the Inflation Reduction Act that provides $85 per ton of CO2 that you capture, and then you add the $30 market price of California, it will make like an obvious good combination that you start to develop a business case. But the fact is that the ETS in California for the moment doesn't have a protocol that recognizes the mitigation of CO2 when you do a capture project. First problem. it doesn't have, if you develop a project in California that's going to have an additional operational cost derived from installing a carbon capture facility, it will supply and will compete with other facilities, not only in California, but in surrounding states that will not have those additional costs. So we think that the CBAM should accompany an ETS that is already existing. So that's an additional element that's not there, but for sure we think it has to be there. Otherwise, there will be not, we will not be able to compete in offering a product with a much higher embedded cost than compete offers in the market. So when you start to develop, think about those elements, you see that this is a complex task, no, and a complex
Absolutely
challenge,
complex task. Thank you. And you know, you went over your 3 minutes, but I'm going to forgive you because I'm going to say this. You covered a lot of topics that I just want to highlight in a bit of a summary to say, you know, getting experts internally, getting buy-in corporately from internally was really important thing that you highlighted, as well as explaining that, you know, people on the ground and having the capacity to do this is also very important. But that was almost your foundational piece for your projects that then linked in past, you know, what technology, how are we going to do this, to now how are we going to do this with governments and incentives and figuring it out. So it was a really lovely timeline that you walked through. Thanks, Vincent, for doing that. We'll move down the line. Thanks. We might not get to our questions at this pace, but I'm okay with that.
All right, I can do a quick introduction and then we can move.
Then I'll go right to you for the first question.
So Vince Beck from Heidelberg Materials. As also mentioned before, I mean, we have quite ambitious sustainability strategy and targets, right? We want to reduce our emissions by 47% by 2030, focused on scope 1 and 2 and in comparison to 1990. And achieve a net zero status by 2050 and earlier in Europe and in other jurisdictions. And in order to get there, I think Vincent already mentioned it, we really need to reinvent our heat, not too complex system where we add new plants which are low heat and very complex. And for that, of course, we need to build new expertise, new knowledge, and we also need to have the skills and the setup in place. So similar to CEMEX, we also built a project management office which takes care of our CCUS projects globally and supports then the countries in developing these CCUS projects. But it's also very clear that from a resource point of view and from a staffing point of view that the actual project implementation must come from the countries. So it is very much a top-down but also a bottom-up approach what we have. I think when we talk about our sustainability strategy, I also fully agree that emission reduction must come first. So we really do everything we can in order to reduce our emissions as much as we can, and that's probably 60% of the equation. And I think we already talked a lot of these points, which is defossilizing our energy mix, using circular solutions. We're investing heavily in our recycling business. But then we really need carbon capture, storage and utilization in order to get to net zero, and happy to introduce some of the projects in more detail.
That'd be great. Thank you. Moving down.
Thanks, Winston. Hi, I'm Cédric Demeus from Holcim. I'm in charge of government relations there. I'll go very quick on the introduction. CCUS is one of 4 levers that we focus on in terms of our CO2 reduction strategy in the Net Zero Ambition 2050. I'll focus solely on the CCUS pillar. Where are we today? We started a few years back. I remember I had a couple of colleagues that knew a little bit about CCUS. They were in our research center in Switzerland. 2 guys. We've moved today to a fully fledged corporate team that has all the expertise, from technology to energy to public policy and a regulatory framework, and so on and so forth. So a really strong knowledge center that works with each and every country where we are working on CCUS, which means almost all countries. Of course, I would love to tell you we have a pipeline of 120 very high mature projects. No, we don't. We're working on some 150 CCUS related projects on different parts of the CCUS project implementation and value chain. Today we have 11 what we call flagship projects, so that's projects that are very mature from a technological perspective, financing perspective, and implementation permitting perspective. 6 in Europe that are what we call shovel ready, so it's actually happening. We're in the implementation phase, and we can talk about some of them.
Absolutely.
I'll leave it at that for now as an
Great,
introduction.
that's fantastic. Thank you. Last but not least.
Thank you, Beth. So it's Antonis Kirkos. I'm the head of strategy and digital in Titan Cement. And in Titan, similar to my colleagues, we have a very ambitious strategy on sustainability and on decarbonizing our product. We are committed to reduce our scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions by more than 20% by the end of the decade versus 2020. And that will be done through a combination of levers. We will very significantly increase our share of alternative fuels. We will increase our alternative fuels by 2.4 times versus what we had in 2020. We will reduce our clinker factor. We recently invested in a JV for a very big reserve of pozzolanic materials in the Mediterranean, which we will use to reduce our clinker content in our green cements of the future. And we are reducing our energy consumption, including by very advanced digital solutions at our plant. But carbon capture and storage is a very integral part of our strategy as well. And we recently announced a CCU project, CCS project in Greece, funded by the Innovation Fund of the European Union. It will be one of the largest such projects in Europe, in our cement plant near Athens in Greece, in Kamari, which will capture at full implementation more than 1.9 million tons of CO2 per annum, and will produce more than 3 million tons of net zero cement by the end of this decade. And within Titan, we started exploring CCS several years ago, first with small-scale R&D type of pilot projects in our Kamari plant, moving on to technical feasibility and pre-feasibility studies, applying for the Innovation Fund, and currently we are at the final stages of signing the grant agreement. So we're maturing that project very fast in Greece, but also we're working in other places. It's not just a one region strategy, we're also looking with technical studies in North America as well. So happy to talk more about it as we go forward.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your introductions. And it helps the audience to understand where your position is, where we're starting from here. And so, you know, in this guidebook, we went through a number of key questions where we actually, you know, looked at what influences your capture technology, you know, things to do with your flue gas. The great thing about cement is you can burn a lot in the kiln, right? And you got to figure out how to capture things, and particulates are a big issue when you're dealing with capture technology. It looked at questions like site location that Mac mentioned. I know the Heidelberg project in Edmonton looked at what side of the highway would actually benefit the project and how that would cool down the flue gas. Like, there's very particular integrated things that happen here. Obviously, it also looks to project financing and government supports and incentives, which a lot of you have mentioned, which are key considerations for getting these projects moving. But then also, you know, I'm actually going to stay over here with Antonis, and I'm going to actually ask you a question about collaboration and partnership. So can you just talk a little bit about the collaboration and partnerships that have been critical for the development of your CCS projects so far?
Sure. So a project of this magnitude and scale cannot happen just by the cement company alone. You need the whole value chain of partners to make it happen. And that starts from the financing of the project, where, of course, we need the European Union, for our case in Greece, with an innovation fund, but also government to subsidize, to make it a fully bankable project, which it currently is, in addition to other financing partners, private debt providers, and so on. And then we need the technology partners. We are currently planning to deploy a combination of technologies, including pre-combustion and post-combustion technologies, and we are partnering with our technology partners to de-risk those technologies as they mature, and to provide win-win incentives for us and them to make sure that technology performs as it is supposed to. And then we need to have partnerships for the electrical energy providers. Such a project requires huge amounts of electrical energy, and to fulfill the mission of net zero, it has to be green energy. So we are working with green electricity providers through PPAs and so on. And then, of course, we have going downstream to the value chain to work with carbon transport providers. We are working with shipping companies that will transport our liquefied CO2 to the storage site, and then we have partnerships that are being developed for the storage itself. And all of those, of course, are under the, let's say, auspices of partnerships with the local authorities and the communities around us, who need to be educated and made aware of the benefits of decarbonizing such a facility close to them, providing green jobs of the future and employment going forward. So it's a multi, let's say, partnership environment, and this adds to the complexity of the project, but also makes it all feasible at the end.
Absolutely, and I mean, cement has been around forever, for a very, very long time, and the business of making cement is something that you've refined and figured out over the years. So adding this new layer of business and partnerships and collaboration is something that I hear from cement industries that we know cement, we don't know CCS yet, and so we want to keep making our product, and that's a big consideration. You hear that not just for cement, but other industries that are focused on the end result of their product, and I think those partnerships become very, very important in delivering that product for you, right?
Absolutely, and let me also mention it's a very important, so to speak, collaboration, I would say, with the government, and we heard in our previous panel the importance of maturing regulation, where many unknowns are still, being formulated as we speak, from the regulatory environment around permitting of the facilities to regulations around transport and storage of CO2. As well as some economic instruments that will make the business case work for us. So that's another very crucial aspect here.
Right. Well, I had a series of questions, but I'm going to switch them up a little bit, and it's not going to be anything surprising. So coming over to back to Cedric, it actually is just in the flow of the question. You're mentioning about governments and regulations and regulatory changes. How receptive are you finding governments in supporting the projects that you're looking to deploy? How are you navigating the various policies on a global scale? Because you're not just in one environment as well,
Well, on the easy answer, on the global scale, we can't, because every project is hyper local and needs to respond to very local characteristics. That includes the regulatory framework, that includes the local government support, that includes the local acceptance of the local community, which, by the way, is a very, very important aspect of it, is local acceptance. But going back to the regulatory framework, it starts with understanding what's your carbon price assumption. So I'm thinking of a project in Belgium, for example, Go for Zero, which is shovel ready. It starts by thinking, by analyzing, okay, what is going to be my carbon price, because we have the emissions trading scheme in Europe. What is going to be my carbon price, not next year, but in 2030, 35, 40?
Certainty.
That is an integral part of your business case, in that it's influenced by, it's a market, it's a free market, but it's also heavily influenced by the development of the regulatory framework. So we've been working on a project for, 10 years, and suddenly we see arriving the CBAM in Europe, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which will have an influence on the free allowances and the way ETS works and how we will be treated under the carbon pricing mechanism, and it has a massive impact on the on the business case and the economics of the project. So a lot of head scratching to start with, and there it's the specificity of Europe is that it's at European level with little involvement of the local governments. The local governments were more fundamental for us in terms of supporting, in terms of permitting, advancing on the permitting, and not just relating to the technology, but it's relating to your projection for raw materials, your projection for your energy needs, because such a project is not just the capturing technology. How are you going to power it? In some of our countries, in Croatia, the first question was there, where are we going to get the power from? How are we going to get the green power from? And the response to that is, again, different from project to project. In Belgium, it's going to be, it's a partnership with an energy provider where we're putting 28 gigawatt hour of solar power on lakes that we own in partnership with company Total. That is done there because we have the space and we have this technology which is deployable in partnership with another technology provider. The response will be completely different in other countries.
Yeah.
I'll mention also, remember our teams working and then going back to the regulatory framework. One question was always, okay, we're going to capture and then we're going to transport it, either to store it or to bring it to someone who will use it. If I transport by sea to another country, how is the London Protocol going to work? Who is going to sign this? Do I have to lobby my own government so that they make a bilateral agreement with Denmark or Norway or whatever? So all of these regulatory question marks really underpin the operational ability, is that the correct word?
Absolutely.
Of your CCS projects, and integral part not only of the business case, but on the operations of the projects.
Absolutely. Yeah, Winston, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe just to add to that, I mean, regulatory certainty is also absolutely key for these projects, right? And I think we do see more and more support coming up in the US at the European level, but also in some of the member states. I mean, Germany is just to announce a carbon management strategy, and we see that happening now also. I think also Poland is becoming open, and we see more and more involvement here. But one of the main bottlenecks we actually see is the understaffed authorities. So it's not just about the willingness. It's really also that they need to pick up capacities, both in terms of resources and in terms of knowledge sharing. And I think here it's great to meet at COP, but I think that's where governments need to do more, and where I think the international organizations could, like SEM CCUS and others, and the CCS Knowledge Center could support, is really getting these regulators together and making sure they are learning from each other, and they are learning about these new technologies and what is actually needed, because that is really a major bottleneck, and we can develop these projects in 6 years or so on, but if the permitting and the certification will drag on, these projects will not see the light before 2030, and maybe not even 2035. So that is really something which needs to be worked on.
Can I zoom us back down into the projects? Because I think these are some of the fundamental issues that all projects are dealing with. But I want to zoom into the actual tangible projects a little bit more. And you know, one of the things we really talked about in the guidebook was about site location and how you decide where you're going to. I mean, how many facilities does Heidelberg have currently in the world?
Cement production, we have around 140.
So how would you decide which one of those facilities you want to do your CCS on, besides the regulatory considerations?
Yes.
Thinking maybe storage, locations, those types of things. But then also, like, what do you need to consider in that site in terms of footprint, in terms of water, in terms of those things?
Yeah, so I mean, it's true. So we are looking at all the sites. I think the storage availability is actually a key one, as well as the incentives. But then, of course, we are also looking at the customers, like where would we deliver it, and will we have the demand? We are looking at the logistics. Do we actually have the transport logistics? Do we have the energy. I think the energy is an absolute. It was already mentioned. I mean, we will double to triple our electricity needs when we develop a full-scale CCS project. So, do we have the grids? Will the grids be in place? Will there be the capacity? We have one project in Slite in Sweden, which is a quite large cement production where we aim to capture and store 1.8 million tons of CO2 by 2030, and that's based on an island. So here, that's actually the main cement production in Sweden, and we have a lot of government support. But now all our thinking is about how do we get the energy there, and actually here the Russian war in Ukraine has helped us a bit, because now the Gotland is very strategically important, and the government has just decided to build an electric cable to the island. So that these considerations are absolutely, and one actually people don't think about, but one is also very important, is that space is quite often scarce in these plants. And if we are building a CCS facility, as I mentioned before, it's a plant on top of a plant. So we actually need to have the space to build these facilities. And we also need to have, we will have more people on the site. So we even need to build new houses for offices and for other things. So all these considerations we need to think about when we develop a new CCS project.
Absolutely. That's absolutely right. Thank you for enlightening everybody in the audience on that. But coming over here, you know the question I'm going to ask you, right? I gave it to you in advance. So no, again, I want to keep it down into more that project level and capture technology selections. And how do you decide what your company is going to do and how you're going to select a capture technology for doing these projects? Like, some of these fundamental questions beyond the high level, how are we going to convince governments to do this? Like, how are you going to figure out how to do that?
I think you start at the high level of the basic understanding of that technology. What is the current status of technology readiness level of that technology? What is the current starting cost of operating such a technology? And the most complicated part is imagining the future of that technology, because if you want to place a bet on a technology, you have to think forward, how it will evolve and how the cost of that technology will evolve over time. I think that's the hardest one to figure out. And I think you have to do a lot of different analysis and comparative analysis within all the different technologies, and then you have to link that analysis to the very specific characteristics of your plant. Once you have gone into the process of deciding what plants, then you have to figure out for each plant what is the perfect fit, And I think one very important element is once you decide conceptually the technology, there's the actual companies behind the technologies and the actual commitment from those companies and the level of risk or joint commitment that they are willing to take with you in the same ride. You are going to marry with someone for the next 30 years, so you have to have a very strong commitment. It's not only a technological decision, it's the I don't know how you call it, the chemistry that you have as a partner and the level of commitment of that partner, because I think what is also happening is that since there are not many options and there are several companies trying to develop projects, it becomes a competitive issue, and I'm sure that on the other side of the table, they have also to make the decisions on who to commit with and who is the partner that they are going to have to rely on to develop their technology. So I would say that there are technological elements, but then it's the companies behind those technologies that could really make a difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very well put. And Oh, please go ahead. Please add. I was going to ask you a question about competitiveness, so you can or competition, but you go ahead.
Yeah. So, in addition to what I have a different perspective. I mean, definitely yes, we would start with scanning the plethora of carbon capture technologies and move on with which one will be perfectly set for a particular plant. But the perceptions. I think there's a different perception as well, which exists is instead of starting from which capture technologies to pick with, you can also start with what is your end goal. I mean, is my objective utilization or am I looking at storage? uh, I think if we have the end use of what we are going to do with that CO2, uh, you know, selection of plants, yes, there are different ways to do it, but as other panelists have already said, but I think it's important to understand that even a different approach wherein we look at what are we going to do with that CO2 is another approach. You start with that, and some of the technologies are already at higher TRLs which can be implemented, but it's a tough question to go. And what was the other one?
I was just going to actually ask a question about competition. And so, from your perspective, which is different from our members' perspective, what is the value of breaking outside of a competitive environment to share knowledge and collaborate at this stage as opposed to competing, given that this is a technology that we need to scale up now and at a very rapid scale?
It's a tough question. I'll be very honest, but if we look at concrete, yes, it is the most used material after water, yes, and at the end of the day, we all are into business. So competition, I would say yes, there will be competitiveness on how is it going for every company. But what we have realized in when we were developing the handbook was also the eagerness to learn from the successes, or also to understand what are the things that will not work for a CCUS project. So even though it is critical for the industry to collaborate, definitely under the competition law, we have to follow some boundaries. But I would say that it is very critical to collaborate if we really want to achieve a net zero target. I don't see that happening without industry being maybe a little open, which we are already trying to do. GCCA is trying to work with members, and that's how we landed into the report like this.
I would hope a lot open,
Yes,
and not a
yes,
little.
yeah.
And so we want to help do that with SAM, our partners, and the GCCSI, ourselves at the Knowledge Center, and other knowledge providers in the space, and we're here to help. That's literally what we're about. So I really want to thank my panel today. There are questions from the audience, but I don't have time, unfortunately, because I want to invite you all. At 11:30, the UNFCCC is hosting the only official CCS event for COP, and it is on decarbonizing cement and with developing countries as well, at side event room 1 in building 79, just across the whatever you call that road. So a big hand for my panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.